My name is Gene Tang, and I'm really excited to see you all here in what's going to be a massively information-packed day for you. Now, in this session today, we're going to be talking about migrations. Specifically, we're going to focus on a migration process that we believe will allow you to maximize your benefits as well as your competitive advantage. So what are we going to cover in this session today? We're firstly going to talk about who Rackspace are and what we do on AWS. From there, we're going to move into the heart of the presentation, talk about the motivation behind today's migration topic, then introduce you to our three-stage migration lifecycle, and then follow that up with a real-world use case. But first, a bit about myself. I am a senior solutions architect at Rackspace, and apparently that picture was the most handsome picture that our marketing team could find of me. Now, I've been at Rackspace for about 5 years now, but been in IT for well over 12 in numerous different roles. And although I do identify as a cloud architect, my area of focus is very much big data, so technologies such as Cassandra, Spark, as well as Hadoop. So if you have any questions around those technologies or big data on AWS, please do feel free to come chat to me after today's presentation. So now that you know who I am, who are Rackspace? Rackspace is the #1 managed cloud company as rated by Gartner. And our purpose is to provide the best solutions to you, combined with the best support and customer experience of any managed service provider out there. And we refer to this support and this experience as fanatical support. And we've been delivering fanatical support for well over 18 years with thousands of different customers and partners, as you can see on the slide, based across 120 different countries and split across multiple industries, including government, finance, as well as e-commerce. Now, I am curious, by show of hands in the audience today, who has heard of Rackspace before? Oh, that's great. There's a good number of people. That's good to see. So for those of you who have heard of Rackspace before, you probably have one burning question in your mind, and that is, isn't Rackspace a competitor to AWS? Well, not anymore. As a managed service provider that puts that service at the forefront, our focus has always been on providing the best solutions and support to our customers, irrelevant of the technologies underneath. In fact, we pride ourselves on supporting multiple different platforms that you want and that you use. And we help you get the best out of those platforms. And so in the spirit of this, and in February of this year, we introduced something that our customers have long been asking for, and that is fanatical support for AWS. This is where we take our fanatical support, our solutions-driven mentality, and our support focus, and we combine it with the world-class infrastructure of AWS. And as a recognized managed services partner and reseller of AWS, we're able to do this in an end-to-end way, making us your one point of contact for all your account, your technical, and your billing-related queries. So great, that's what we do, but how exactly do we help you? Well, we help support your platforms for you. I was watching a Rackspace customer testimonial video the other day from a company known as Double Dutch. And their CTO, Nicholas Clark, said in just a few words the exact value that Rackspace brings. He said, they, being us Rackspace, allow us to focus on building a product while they take care of keeping things up. So in the same way that AWS removes that undifferentiated heavy lifting of infrastructure, we remove the burden of needing to know how to architect, build, as well as support your solution day to day, allowing you to stay focused on your product or service. And we take great pride in the fact that we support several software platforms that you use, like Magento, Hybris, and Adobe Experience Manager, as well as the software stacks you use, such as the LAMP and the Mean stack. And we help manage your security as well. Now, you all here would have heard of the Panama Papers leak by now, the largest leak in history. They're still not entirely sure exactly how that leak occurred, but everything points to a hack. Now, regardless of the side of the fence you stand on with regard to this leak, I can categorically say there's nobody in this room that wants to be that IT guy that's at the receiving end of that hack. But the problem with preventing a hack is it's hard to do. You need a team of skilled security professionals as well as the right tools to get it right, and that is hard. And that's why we introduced managed security, where we take best-of-breed vendors, security vendors such as CrowdStrike, Alert Logic, and LogRhythm to build a comprehensive security wrap around your environment that is then monitored in real time by our Security Operations Center to ensure the highest level of security and compliance for your environment at all times. And we do the same thing for DevOps as well. I was reading a TechTarget article the other day stating that DevOps is the #1 challenge of IT in 2016. The reason this article states is organizations simply don't know how to integrate DevOps tools and processes into their current systems. And that's why we built a DevOps team who help advise you, who write the scripts, and who help manage those DevOps tools to ease your transition into DevOps and allow you to stay focused on the culture and process aspect of DevOps. Now, these are just some of the solutions and capabilities we provide as an AWS MSP. But I do strongly recommend you come talk to us at our booth in the Stanford Ballroom if you have other specific requirements. Now, getting into the heart of this presentation, we're all in this room because we want to learn more about migrations. Now, I'm not going to beat around the bush. Migrations are hard. And there's several components to migrations, such as migrating business processes and verifying your compliance and regulation. But because I am a solutions architect, and because I do only have 30 minutes, I'm going to keep the focus of this presentation very narrow on technical migrations and how you can use the tools around you to help with your application migration. But for those of you that do want that more broader, more holistic view of migrations, I do strongly recommend AWS's own Cloud Adoption Framework. It covers aspects such as people, business, and process, and I'll provide a link to the CAF at the end of today's presentation. Now on to technical migrations. At this stage, I'm going to assume that you've already established a really great candidate application for cloud, and now you're deciding, how exactly do I get that onto cloud? Now, the common literature states that there's really two approaches, a forklift approach, as well as some form of re-architecture. Now, the forklift approach is where we take our application exactly as it is now, and we move it into cloud with the same architecture and configuration. The primary benefit of this is it minimizes the transformation effort to get onto cloud. There's no need to redevelop your application or change your business processes for that matter. Rather, you generally can continue operating as you have been while reaping some of those immediate benefits that cloud can provide. The re-architecture approach, on the other hand, is where you do make changes to your application to integrate in new cloud services or redevelop around cloud design principles. And by taking this re-architecture approach, you actually open up further cloud advantages, such as improved elasticity or improved availability. The difficulty of the approach, of course, is that you do need to invest that extra time and effort to test, understand, and integrate those new cloud services and the changes you make to your application. So therefore, the question arises, which approach should I take? The common literature, after all, states it's one or the other. Our view, having done hundreds of migrations of our customers onto AWS in our own cloud, is in fact to take both approaches in a migration lifecycle that affords us the ability to get those quick wins, as well as drives us towards those further cloud advantages. And we call this migration lifecycle the Act, Enhance, Pioneer Migration Lifecycle. Now, going straight into it, Act is the first stage of the migration lifecycle and is the call to action. The goal here is to get onto cloud as quickly as possible so we can reap some of those quick wins that cloud can provide. Quick wins like reduced costs through pay-as-you-go usage. We had a customer that managed to decrease their testing costs by about 15% simply by automating the shutdown of their testing environment during nights and weekends. You also get access to enterprise-grade hardware now. In a previous work life, the cost of a big-name load balance was 1/4 of our yearly budget. We couldn't afford it then, but we can now with cloud. You can now go global very quickly through AWS's 12 regions. And last but not least, you now have the opportunity to refocus your team's skills away from hardware and data centers and onto projects that now directly generate value. Now, at this first stage of migration where we want to get onto cloud, we recommend a forklift. This is because a forklift minimizes that time and effort to get onto cloud, and therefore the time to start realizing these quick wins. It also allows you to stay very focused in your migration, ensuring you get your migration right the first time and not be distracted by efforts such as redevelopment efforts. And when it comes to services you're going to use at this forklift stage, we keep it very focused. EC2 is our servers in the cloud. They come in many different types, sizes, Windows and Linux flavors, and these server instances are going to host our application in the cloud. VPC allows us to create a private network in the cloud, and this can be set up to mirror our current network configuration to ensure a smooth transition. For devices such as load balancers as well as firewalls, we look to other AWS services such as elastic load balancing as well as security groups, which provide similar functionality. And for more specific devices, such as IDSs and antivirus, we can always look to the AWS Marketplace, which is populated by hundreds of different vendors that we all use. Now, when it comes to services that can facilitate this forklift migration, we look to other services like Direct Connect, Storage Gateway, as well as Import-Export, which provide a mechanism to get our data from our premises into cloud. You also have VM Import-Export that allows us to convert our private cloud virtual machines from Hyper-V, VMware, as well as Xen for use on AWS. And also, the last one I'll mention is Database Migration Service, which is a brand new service intended on helping you replicate your data from your on-premise database into cloud, for example, on an EC2 instance. Now, the second stage of our migration lifecycle is the enhance phase. The goal here is to take our first steps towards cloud integration, and we do that by enhancing our application with managed services. Now again, I'm curious, by show of hands in the audience today, who knows what a managed service is? Okay, so there's not many of you. So this slide will be very important since managed services are critical to getting the most out of AWS. Now, the best way for me to describe a managed service is to tell you a little bit of a story. Now, a few months ago, my wife came to me and said to me, "Gene, I want to start a blog." The thing is, my wife knows nothing about computers whatsoever. So I could either tell her all the different blogging platforms, how to set them up, who to host them with, knowing full well that her face is going to glaze over because she simply doesn't care, or I could just do it all for her, provide her a username and password, and let her log in. Now, if I chose that latter, to her, I'm a managed service for blogs. So continuing with the same theme, AWS provides several managed services for common software components such as MySQL and Active Directory. And these managed services take care of all the operational stuff you don't care about, such as installation, patching, as well as backups. Rather, all you do is click a few buttons, it provides connection details, and you connect and consume that service as you otherwise would. And by moving to these managed services, you stand to gain a number of different benefits. You can see some of these on the slide. Now, as a solutions architect, I actually find that there's really three benefits that resonate most with my customers. The first is improved availability. All the managed services have high availability already built in, or at least as an option. Now, if you think about that for a second, in the past, you needed to get a team together, acquire the hardware, spend a few days to set up clustering to get high availability. With managed services now, you click a button, hit next, and you have the exact same thing. The other thing that resonates heavily with customers is improved scalability. In the same way that all the managed services have high availability built in as an option or at a click of a button, all the managed services also have the ability to scale up and scale out at a touch of a button as well. And this allows you to stay really agile. And the last thing that resonates with customers heavily is that reduced time to market. And this is simply by virtue of your team having more time to focus on things that matter and not operational stuff that doesn't. Now, at this enhanced stage, we want to re-architect our application and integrate as many managed services into our application as possible. And this is otherwise known as a replat form. This means we take our EC2-based servers within our application architecture and replace them with their equivalent managed service if they exist. For example, replacing our EC2-based MySQL with AWS's relational database MySQL, Service MySQL, which is their database as a service offering. Now, AWS provides many managed services, but the ones that I find most useful at this stage are what I like to refer to as Dropin Replacement managed services, and you can see some of these on the slide here. We've already mentioned RDS, or Relational Database Service, which provides a Oracle, MySQL, SQL Server, and Postgres database as a service in the cloud. But you also have Directory Service, which also provides a managed Active Directory in the cloud. S3, which provides cloud and object storage, as well as Elastic Beanstalk, which provides a fully managed software stack, a lot like a platform as a service, but with more flexibility. Now, in addition to augmenting your application with managed services, we also want to start looking to further supporting services that open up further benefits to our application. Autoscaling allows us to increase our application agility while decreasing cost. And it does so by leveraging the elasticity of cloud to adjust the size of our server farm based on demand. This makes it really useful for spiky workloads, such as if you have a sale every other week, since it allows us to match our usage with our demand. You also have Identity Access Management, or IAM, CloudTrail, as well as AWS Config, which are all security-related services aimed at enhancing your security at the AWS control plane and are very much services you should be using at this stage. And the final ones I'll mention is CloudWatch, Inspector, and Trusted Advisor, which are all services associated with alerting, monitoring, and best practicing guidance. And these help ensure the ongoing health of your application as you grow within AWS. Now, the third stage of our migration lifecycle is the pioneer stage. If you've noticed from the outset of this migration lifecycle, I've advised you to keep your application architecture generally the same. And this has largely been done to minimize the time to start realizing benefits. But it's at the pioneer stage where we want to make changes to our application architecture to make our application cloud aware. Meaning to say, we change our architecture so that we can take full benefit of cloud and its specific characteristics. And by making our application cloud aware or AWS aware, we actually stand to gain the exact same benefits we've talked about, but now at their extreme case. For example, lowest time to market, extreme cost savings, maximum uptime, as well as maximum agility. Now, of course, each of these benefits are in their own right a competitive advantage, especially when you consider them at their extremes. But what we strive for at the pioneer stage isn't just a competitive advantage. After all, you get a competitive advantage just by moving to cloud. No, what we strive for at this pioneer stage is sustainable competitive advantage, where we can integrate and assimilate new services as they arise to keep our application at the cutting edge and to keep us ahead of our competitors. You only need to think of Netflix here. Netflix have single-handedly dominated the industry when it comes to online streaming and pretty much killed off video rental. And part of their success has been down to becoming or having the capability to integrate new services as they arise to keep their people and their processes at the cutting edge. Now, as I've alluded to at the pioneer stage, we want to re-architect or refactor our application. Specifically, we want to refactor it around cloud design principles. And this is always going to start with a rethink of how do we change our application and the processes around our application to make them more cloud aware. Now, I recognize that it's a lot easier to say and a lot harder to do, especially if you don't know exactly what makes a cloud aware application. Thankfully, The bright minds at AWS and around the world have come up with good design principles for a cloud-aware application. And you can see some of these on the slide over here. Now, I'm not going to go through each of these design principles. The reason I show you these is to help you recognize that to take full advantage of cloud, you need to implement these design principles. But if you do want to learn more, I do strongly recommend the link in the slide, which is the AWS architecture site, specifically a white paper known as Cloud Best Practices. Now, when it comes to services you're going to use at this stage, we actually start to focus towards some of those more cutting-edge and developer-centric services. ECS provides containerization and a fully managed Docker. DynamoDB provides a high-performance NoSQL database. SNS and SQS allow us to achieve loose coupling within our application. And AWS Lambda is a really cool new service designed for event-driven computing that is entirely serverless. And on the supporting services side, we start to look to more DevOps as well as automation tools because automation is a critical part of this stage. CloudFormation and OpsWorks allows you to do configuration management and infrastructure as code in the cloud. And code commit, code deploy, and code pipeline allow you to do continuous integration and continuous deployment of your application code. Now, this migration lifecycle where we act by forklifting into cloud, then enhance by replatforming our application with managed services, and then pioneer by refactoring our application around cloud design principles, is one that we find provides the best combination of quick wins as well as long-term vision that drives us towards that sustainable competitive advantage. Now, the best way for me to illustrate this to you further is to take you through an example of a customer we've used this lifecycle on. Now, unfortunately, I can't name this customer's name, but they are an e-commerce store based out here in Southeast Asia. Now, they were also an ex-Rackspace dedicated server customer. Now, they were having big problems with scaling, with their LAMP-based application not being able to scale to meet demand. And also, being based on dedicated servers, they simply couldn't provision these fast enough for their needs. Now, of course, this is a big problem since scaling in e-commerce is everything. If you can't scale, you lose customers. Now, at the time, we had just introduced our AWS offer in beta, and we both looked towards this offer as a potential solution to their problems. And we got them onto cloud by following the exact process we talked about. We acted by lifting and shifting their environment into cloud, sizing their EC2 instances very similar to the dedicated servers. And by minimizing this transformation effort, we were able to complete the migration and testing in less than 2 months. And it brought them the immediate advantage of now being able to provision servers within minutes, thereby solving one of their big challenges. Now, in the enhanced phase, we bolstered their application with managed services, meaning we replaced their EC2-based MySQL with RDS. And this immediately brought them improved availability through RDS's multi-availability zone feature. We also introduced Elasticache Memcache, replacing their Memcache servers, simply because it meant one less service to support. And finally, we introduced CloudFront CDN, really just as a stopgap as to their performance issues, but it in fact worked really well, decreasing their server load by about 10%. Now, in the pioneer stage, this is where the customer wanted to make changes to their application to improve their situation. They came into this process knowing full well there's going to be a rewrite with their new application stack based on Nginx, Node, as well as MySQL. But given their experience on AWS, which was a great experience, they also made a strategic decision to further integrate into AWS as well. This meant continuing to use EC2 instances for their Node and as well as their Nginx, with autoscaling, of course, and RDS for MySQL, but also SQS for queuing, as well as Elasticache Redis for their session caching. This was all underpinned by Rackspace's DevOps service, who wrote the configuration management scripts on Ansible, as well as CloudFormation, as well as their CI/CD pipelines in Jenkins. Now, of course, this process was not as perfect and as seamless as I've made it out to be. There were a number of different issues we had to overcome, such as hard-coded host names in the application. But when all said and done, the outputs have only been positive. Through automation, they can now scale from 3 servers to 150 servers in minutes to meet demand. And through a far more optimized application stack, as well as through autoscaling, they've actually been able to decrease their infrastructure spend by about 10% consistently, despite growing in revenues. Now, we attribute this customer's success down to vision and planning. And a big part of that was the migration lifecycle, which allowed them to narrow their focus into stages with specific purpose, migration method, and outcomes. And we've taken a number of different clients through this migration lifecycle, and we're happy to share those with you. But what we think will be more valuable to you is if we can contextualize this migration lifecycle within your environment. And so we're offering to everybody here today a free migration assessment where we review your infrastructure and provide best practice guidance onto AWS. And you can sign up for the assessments in the link in the slide. I've also provided some links to the other resources we've talked about in today's presentation as well. Now, to end, I want to leave you with one final message. At the start of this presentation, I said that migrations are hard. But with the right planning and vision, and through calculated steps, as we've talked about in our migration lifecycle, you can use your migration as an instrument to turn your application and the infrastructure it sits on from just a tool into a sustainable competitive weapon. Thank you.